Aren't you going to say hello?
There are not many movies made for kids in the horror genre. When you put on a movie for a kid to watch, the last type of movie you would want to show them would be a scary movie. After all, it'll give them nightmares, and then they'll want to sleep in bed with you that night. I did the same thing to my parents when I was younger. It was always the movies with aliens that got me.
Won't do any good to run, girly boy.
However, I always loved to watch the scary and creepy shows that were made for kids in the 90s. They were never made with too serious of an adult horror tone, so I was never too scared, and I couldn't get enough of them. They were what's known as gateway horror. Gateway horror is horror entertainment that is made for kids, which can hook them into watching R-rated and mature horror entertainment when they get older. Since these gateway horror TV shows were made for commercial TV, they could never be too intense. These same restrictions extended to movies made for TV as well, and one horror movie that was made for TV in 2 parts would go on to become what I believe to be the perfect horror movie that was made for kids. That movie was Stephen King's It. The first adaptation of Stephen King's great novel was made in 1990. It aired in 2 parts, and would later be combined into one complete movie for home release. I actually had the 2-pack VHS set growing up. What makes It a great horror movie for kids is that, just like The Goonies, it's a movie where a group of kids are the main characters. At least, for the first part of the story. Also known as the best part of the story.
Lucky 7.
It's no secret that for most viewers and readers, the best part of Stephen King's story was always the parts that revolved around the kids the most. Those were certainly always the parts that connected with me as a kid the most when I watched it when I was young. Not that I think that the adult parts are bad. They are very well acted by a great cast, but the real heart of the story revolves around the portion of the tale where the characters are kids.
Swear to me. Swear to me that if it isn't dead, it will come back.
The story begins when the younger brother of one of the kids gets murdered by a clown in a drain. The supernatural clown known as Pennywise, played wonderfully by the great Tim Curry, then goes on to terrorize a bunch of kids in the small Maine town of Derry. The group of kids soon get brought together in an effort to protect themselves from a group of local bullies.
I'll kill you all. Get some new material, champ.
They eventually realize that they have all seen the evil clown that also haunts them, and they set out to find Pennywise in the sewers and defeat the evil monster. Whenever the adult versions of the kids get a call from Mike, the one kid who stayed in Derry as an adult, informing them that it's back, we then get a flashback for each one showing their first encounter with it. The friendship that forms between the kids is what binds the story together. It's that bond that they form that makes them come back when they are adults, when Pennywise comes back 30 years later. Together, they all form the Losers Club after having the apocalyptic rock fight with the bully Henry Bowers and his gang. Once the club realizes that they are all being preyed upon by the evil clown, they decide to head down to its lair and defeat him. The club's confrontation with it is my favorite scene in the movie. We get some great visuals and effects, and Henry Bowers also gets what was coming to him by being so scared by it that his hair turns white. The visual of Belch getting pulled into that pipe is also one that sticks with you. I also love that Beverly was the best at firing the slingshot used to defeat it. It makes her an integral part of the group, and it also prevents her from being just a damsel in distress. At least, in this adaptation of the novel. We also get to see Small Eddie stand up to it with his inhaler, using the power of faith to hurt it.
This is battery acid, you slime!
Eventually, it escapes back into the sewer, leading all the children to make the promise that if it ever comes back, then they will too. As great as the story with the kids is, I always found the story involving their adult counterparts 30 years later to be equally as engaging. I credit this mostly with the stellar ensemble cast that makes up the adult versions of the characters. They play very well off one another, and you can believe that these are a bunch of old childhood friends meeting up again as adults for the very first time.
No offense, pal. It ain't helping.
Harry Anderson gives a great performance as the adult Richie, and is my favorite character among the adults. Richard Thomas and Tim Reed play the adult Bill and Mike, and they have some really great chemistry in their scenes with one another. The always excellent John Ritter also plays the adult Ben, and is part of one of the more hilarious and memorable scenes of the movie.
Kiss me, fat boy.
No mention of the great cast can be complete, however, without bringing up the all-time classic performance of Tim Curry as Pennywise.
I'll show you how to slow down.
His was the performance that made a whole generation of kids scared of clowns. His characterization of Pennywise was so creepy and realistic that everyone on set avoided him during filming. And I can see why. Even the kid who played Georgie told Tim that he was scaring him, to which Tim replied that he was sorry, but he is supposed to be scary. That first scene with Pennywise pulling Georgie down into the sewer has to be the most iconic and scariest of all.
And when you're down here with me,
You float down!
For as scary as this movie can get, since it was made for network TV, it never gets too gory and graphic, so it's not too bad of a horror movie for young kids to watch. This is a reason why the theatrical adaptation of it that came out in 2017 was so well received. The kids that grew up watching this version of it finally got to see the adult version. Being an R-rated theatrical release, it finally allowed Stephen King's great epic novel to be told in its fully graphic and uncensored glory. Well, aside from a few of the more controversial sexual scenes involving the kids from the novel. Stephen King was on quite a lot of cocaine at the time, back in the 80s when he wrote it, after all.
Yeah, honey, we got ourselves a real tragedy here. This is an American tragedy.
While I believe that the 2017 movie of It is the superior and authentic adaptation of King's novel, I still also believe that the 1990 network adaptation is the perfect version for kids. It presents the major and important themes of the novel without getting too intense that kids can watch it without wetting their pants. And it has a great cast playing the characters throughout it. It relies more on the telling of the story itself, and the story is one of the greatest that King ever wrote. For these reasons, the 1990 adaptation of It will always be the perfect kids' horror movie for me.
Do you have Prince Albert in a can? You do? Well, you better let the poor guy out.